The year is 1945. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, has just ended. The Allied powers, led by the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, emerged victorious against the Axis powers. A sense of relief swept across the globe, but it was short-lived. The wartime alliance that had held the Allied powers together began to fracture. In its place, a new conflict emerged, one that would shape the second half of the 20th century, the Cold War. The Cold War was not a hot war in the traditional sense. There were no large-scale military confrontations directly between the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Instead, it was a period of intense geopolitical rivalry, characterized by mistrust, suspicion, and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. The seeds of the Cold War were sown in the aftermath of World War II. The United States and the Soviet Union represented two fundamentally different ideologies. The United States championed capitalism, a system based on private ownership, free markets, and individual initiative. Capitalism, argued the Americans, offered the best path to prosperity, innovation, and personal liberty. The Soviet Union, in contrast, adhered to communism, an ideology that advocated for a classless society where the means of production were owned and controlled by the state. Communism, according to Soviet ideology, aimed to create a more equitable society by eliminating the exploitation of workers and distributing wealth more evenly. These ideological differences extended far beyond economics. The United States promoted democracy, individual rights, and freedom of speech. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, maintained a one-party state, suppressed dissent, and controlled information. Both the United States and the Soviet Union sought to expand their spheres of influence, competing for allies and supporting proxy wars in various parts of the world. The ideological struggle between capitalism and communism was not just a battle of ideas, it was a struggle for the hearts and minds of people worldwide. The Cold War was punctuated by numerous crises that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. One of the earliest and most iconic confrontations was the Berlin blockade and airlift, from 1948 to 1949. After World War II, Germany was divided into 4 zones of occupation controlled by the Allied powers. Berlin, although located deep within the Soviet zone, was also divided, with the western part of the city controlled by the United States, Britain, and France. In 1948, the Soviet Union, seeking to exert control over all of Berlin, blockaded all land and water routes into the western sectors of the city. Determined to prevent West Berlin from falling under Soviet control, the United States and its allies launched a massive airlift operation. For over a year, cargo planes delivered food, fuel, medicine, and other essential supplies to the blockaded city, keeping West Berlin alive and defying Soviet pressure. Another flashpoint of the Cold War was the Korean War, from 1950 to 1953. This conflict erupted when Communist North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, invaded US-backed South Korea. The United States, fearing the spread of communism, intervened militarily, leading to a bloody 3-year war that ended in a stalemate. Perhaps the closest the world came to nuclear war during the Cold War was the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Section 4. Leaders at the helm, shaping the course of the Cold War. The Cold War was a complex and multifaceted conflict, shaped by the decisions and actions of numerous individuals on both sides. Some of the key figures who left an indelible mark on this era include President Harry S. Truman, who assumed the presidency following the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1945. Truman played a pivotal role in shaping the early years of the Cold War, implementing the Truman Doctrine, which pledged U.S. support for countries threatened by communism, and overseeing the Marshall Plan, a massive economic aid program to rebuild war-torn Europe. Joseph Stalin, the ruthless dictator of the Soviet Union, who consolidated his power after World War II. Stalin expanded Soviet influence in Eastern Europe and presided over a period of repression and terror at home. President Ronald Reagan, who took office during a period of renewed Cold War tensions. A staunch anti-communist, Reagan adopted a hardline stance against the Soviet Union, significantly increasing U.S. military spending and launching the Strategic Defense Initiative, a controversial missile defense system. Mikhail Gorbachev, whose rise to power in the Soviet Union marked a turning point in the Cold War. Section 5. The Iron Curtain crumbles, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union, weakened by economic stagnation, internal dissent, and the costly arms race with the United States, was on the verge of collapse. In 1989, a wave of revolutions swept across Eastern Europe, toppling communist regimes in Poland, Hungary, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Romania. The most iconic event of this period was the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989. For nearly 3 decades, this concrete barrier had stood as a potent symbol of Cold War division, separating East and West Berlin. Its sudden and unexpected fall, prompted by a relaxation of border controls by the East German government, triggered celebrations around the world and marked a symbolic end to the Cold War. The collapse of the Soviet Union itself followed soon after. Section 6. The Legacy of Distrust. The Cold War's enduring impact. The Cold War may be over, but its legacy continues to shape the world today. The decades-long rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union had a profound impact on international relations, military strategy, technological development, and popular culture. One of the most enduring legacies of the Cold War is the nuclear legacy. The arms race between the two superpowers resulted in the accumulation of vast nuclear arsenals, leaving the world with a chilling reminder of the destructive power of these weapons. Although the threat of nuclear war has receded since the end of the Cold War, the proliferation of nuclear weapons remains a major concern in the 21st century. Section 7. Lessons from the Brink, a World Transformed. The Cold War taught the world many valuable lessons. Perhaps the most important is the danger of ideological extremism and the importance of dialogue and diplomacy in resolving international disputes. The Cuban Missile Crisis in particular demonstrated how quickly misunderstandings and miscalculations could escalate into a global catastrophe. The Cold War also highlighted the importance of international cooperation and the need for institutions that can foster dialogue and promote peaceful resolution of conflicts. The United Nations, though often criticized for its shortcomings, played a vital role in providing a forum for dialogue and diplomacy during the Cold War, helping to prevent the outbreak of a major war between the superpowers. The end of the Cold War, while a cause for celebration, also brought new challenges. The collapse of the Soviet Union created a power vacuum in Eastern Europe and other parts of the world, leading to ethnic conflicts, regional instability, and the rise of new threats to international security.